Redditors who spend a lot of time in seclusion, at sea, in the air, or out in the wilderness, what's the creepiest or most mysterious thing you've seen, found, or experienced? More mysterious than creepy. We were camping in Montana near Yellowstone Park in a small campground. It was the off-season, and there were maybe 5 other people there, including a couple 3 to 4 spots down, who had a large dog with them in their RV. I walked by, and the dog was friendly, so I petted it and talked to it, and went on my way. Later that night, I am sitting watching the sunset and reading on my Kindle when a cold nose bumps up under my arm, like a dog does when it wants attention. I figured it was the dog and started scratching its head. Before I could look around, my friend came around the corner and froze with a look of fright on his face. I was scratching the head of a pretty big gray wolf. I had no idea what to do. I didn't want to keep touching it, but I didn't want to stop and piss it off either. I scratched for maybe 5 to 10 more seconds, and it just looked at me like, "Thanks bro," and walked off into the woods. We went to a hotel that night. I live in the only house down a country road. Everything else is pasture land and national forest for several miles. About 3 a.m. and 3 large dogs go absolutely nuts barking, which sends my husband and me flying out of bed to check on our livestock, assuming coyotes were in the yard. Before we could even get our shoes on, we heard muttering on our front porch. He grabs his rifle, and whoever it is, starts knocking on the door, with no real urgency but more like a casual visitor. I had my cell phone already dialing the cops, and my husband slid up to the peephole. A woman right around her late 20s early 30s was standing outside, patiently waiting a few minutes and gently knocking on the door, not fidgeting or nervous, not being aggressive. My husband said, "Ma'am, the cops are on the way. If you need help, they'll be here in just a few minutes and you're welcome to sit on the swing right there and wait on them, but if there's anyone with you, we are armed in here and will not hesitate to shoot if anyone tries getting into this house." He said. She kind of smiled, not creepy but like she was glad her knocking woke someone up. "That's okay, sir, I just wanted to let you know the thing in the woods is coming, and he'll be here soon. Good luck," he said. She turned around and walked down the driveway like she hadn't a care in the world. The cops looked all over the place and couldn't find her. It's a 10-minute drive to our driveway from the main road, with no houses until you get into town, another 20 minutes away. Freaked me out for weeks. Serious, I was living in a dirt floor cabin for about 6 months. I would pack a lunch and hike out half a day in random directions. One day I found an abandoned hotel with an attic full of bats. The old kitchen was full of taxidermy. Not abandoned old taxidermy, current taxidermy, in various states of finish. There was a closet with stacks of dead birds, tools, woodworking tools, and glass for the display cases, etc. I noped out of there in a hurry. I took my brother there later because he didn't believe me. So, I have a witness. I was 13 and on a week-long camping trip. There were 2 adults and 5 other kids my age. One night we had spent all day kayaking and got caught in a deluge that threw off our whole schedule for the day. We couldn't quite make it to the location where we were supposed to set up camp for the night before sunset, so we just settled a few meters off of the river. We were so exhausted that the adults didn't even want to build a fire. Since we didn't have much light and it was hot, they told us that we didn't have to build our shelters. We could just lay out in our sleeping bags. Everyone put their sleeping bags near a clearing that was created by a fell tree. But I saw the hole created by the roots and thought that there were possible creepy crawlies living in it. So, I set my sleeping bag a little further back, about 4 meters away from the clearing. I woke up a few hours later to these rapid clicking sounds and sniffing. Thanks to the internet, I later identified it as deer noises. There were a bunch of them. The clicking grew closer and had surrounded me on all sides. I had my flashlight, but I didn't want to shine it. After all, I was afraid to scare the deer/creatures because I thought they would trample me. The most vocal deer then stepped on my sleeping bag and eventually sat down on it. I could hear the other deer get comfortable too. After a while, I allow myself to peek out, not wearing my glasses, and I see maybe 15 deer/creatures all just watching the other campers. After several hours I fell asleep and woke back up as they were leaving at sunrise. It was wholesome creepy. So, I worked at a ranch in southern Arizona, right on the border. I didn't really consider it to be secluded because I had horses and cows. In hindsight, I guess it was really lonely because sometimes they'd talk back to me. Anyways, doing fence borders with a guy from another camp, and we had to go down into this dry riverbed. As we round the bend, we see many beat-up trucks sitting there armed to the teeth. Turns out we ran into some kind of big deal for a cartel. The other guy told me to keep steady, and we just walked straight through them on our horses. Everyone was staring at us, looking like they were ready to shoot us up if we made one false move. I asked about it when we got to the other side without turning into Swiss cheese, and the more experienced rancher told me, the cartel only cares about border patrol and cops. They know this is a ranch, and they know we roam around here, and they know we don't say much. The reason being, if they ever assumed the ranchers were the snitches, they could easily find our little ranch houses. Only had one person to so many acres. I could have been off and left there for many days before someone noticed. With all that in mind, I had a very passive relationship with those kinds from then on. I was hiking through the remnants of a remote, long abandoned town in the surrounding area. To get to as far into the woods as I was, you had to cross fallen trees over a creek 3 times. I had just crossed the 3rd bridge and was about 5 miles in, and something blue caught my eye just ahead of me. There was a man, in his 60s at least, wearing blue satin pajamas, sitting in a tree. The closer I got to him, the louder he laughed. It wasn't a maniacal laugh, but it set off all the alarms in my head, nevertheless. He also wasn't wearing any shoes and looked well groomed/cleaned. I gave him a friendly nod as I passed, and he just kept laughing. Then it stopped, and I turned, and he was gone. There was no branch cracking, plants rustling, nothing, and he was just gone. Still rubs me the wrong way. The area I was in was a pretty rough hike, very secluded. Not very many people venture as deep as I was that day. No idea what was going on there. Once, when I was trekking through rural Finland alone, a stroll from the campsite, I decided to stop at a lakeside. I sat down by the lake in the moonlight, surrounded by trees, and felt very calm for a while. Splashed water on my face and generally refreshed myself. Then after spending some time looking at the water, I looked up and across the lake, I saw a really tall figure, half as tall as the trees. It was really skinny, and I'm pretty sure it looked like it had antlers or horns and really long fingers. I don't think it looked at me. I don't know if I was sleep deprived or something, but I remember I froze for a moment before running back to camp. I honestly remember seeing something, and it was large and terrifying. But I was probably just tired and saw a trick of the light. This happened once while camping with my then fiancée and a friend of ours. Camped out in the woods in the middle of nowhere on a hot July day. Night came, and it was a full moon, so around midnight, we decided we'd take a hike around for fun. We basically hiked a trail for a bit and then turned around and hiked it back to the campsite. When we were almost back, we saw a McDonald's cup sitting at the edge of the path. I found this strange as I didn't see the bright red and yellow container when we began the venture, but whatever. However, my buddy decided to open the cup up and found ice cubes at the bottom. That day was easily 90+ Fahrenheit, and at night, it was still in the high 70s, so that ice would not have lasted long. Somebody was definitely out there by us, and we never found another sign of them. No sound of a car, walking or rustling, nothing. We decided to pack up and go home that night. I was a forest fire lookout in the summers during college. Went weeks between seeing another human sometimes. Some of the things I witnessed or heard while doing that job are just flat unexplained. The one that most sticks out in my mind was lying in bed and watching a strange light move through the trees. Figured it was a car with headlights in until it went vertical up into the air and hung for 30 minutes just sitting 20 to 30 miles away, parallel with my tower. I was at an elevation of 7,000 feet. I watched it until it dipped back below the trees and never saw it again. At the time, I was super creeped out but chalked it up to another one of those dozens of things I've seen that I couldn't explain, and no one would believe. But the next day, another lookout called me on the radio asking if I'd seen the same light. He was much closer to but on the other side of it. He said from his perspective, after it dipped below the trees, it landed in an area he knew to be a lake that was only accessible by hiking or horseback. It stood out in my mind because it was the only strange light that summer. We couldn't explain away by either planes, balloons, or tricks of light from cars. I have since wondered if this was a drone, but this was before they were really obtainable to hobbyists. I have never seen one with lights that could be seen that bright from 20 miles or one that will hold a hover for 30 minutes that was around then. I saved the best for last. The lake where that light settled down into, according to the other lookout, is a pretty popular spot for trout fishing. That summer, the lake developed some form of algae or something, and all the fish died off. They stocked it with fish, and they just kept dying off. No one remembers this happening before that summer we saw the light land in it. It was like this for the next 3 summers that I came back as a lookout, and no fish could live in it. Just another weird story from my early 20s as a fire lookout. I was on an outward bound trip in the White River National Forest in Colorado. A part of OB trips is a solo, which can be anywhere from 12 to 48 hours, in which the participants are by themselves with a journal and some snacks. I set up a sweet tent in a tree grouping. It had rained the night before, so the ground was pretty soft. After setting up, I walked around the area. I felt pretty tired and decided to take a nap, for 8 hours. I woke up in the middle of the night to a bunch of twigs cracking. I turned on my torch to see if it was the instructor or any kind of animal. I even called out, "Hey, you good?" Not sure why I said it that way. Nothing. In the morning, I found some big cat tracks right by my tent that were not there when I took my nap. It was really terrifying knowing that a mountain lion was near me when I was sleeping. I told the guides about it, and they got really particular about keeping our food away from where we were sleeping. I was out turkey hunting. We had started hiking at night and had found our spots at about 4 a.m. I was roughly a quarter mile away from my hunting partner, shouting distance. It was pitch black, and we were trying to keep our lights off. I kept hearing human footsteps, coming from almost random directions. After getting sufficiently uncomfortable, I heard a voice that sounded like it was maybe 10 feet behind me. "Hey, lawless syntax." In my hunting partner's voice. I smelled the smell of coffee and Marlboro Reds. I replied, "Sup?" But got no response. I flicked my lighter but didn't see anyone in the area. After saying that a couple of times, I shouted for my hunting partner. He called back from what sounded like a quarter mile away. It started raining in the distance, and heat lightning would occasionally illuminate the field. I saw a tree that looked like a human figure. After a few moments, it wasn't there. More footsteps around me. After a while, when the sun just started to faintly show, I decided to take a break and was getting a bit creeped out, so I walked the quarter mile to my hunting partner's tree stand to ask him what he wanted. He said that he hadn't left his spot and didn't walk up to me at any time in the morning.